Hello mga ka-Try! Welcome to episode 6 of Try Robotics. Last week, we've talked about the light and vibration sensor. And tonight, we'll talk about a lot of different sensors. In fact, we'll talk about 20 different sensors that most robotics enthusiasts and automation enthusiasts are commonly using. And you'd be interested to see what sensor that would be useful to you in your future projects. But before we begin, again, would like to thank all our followers in YouTube as well as on Facebook. And if it's your first time, again, please click that like button and follow us on Facebook, and click that subscribe button if you're watching us through YouTube. And if you have friends who might be interested in robotics, please share these videos with them so that they too can learn while having fun. You remember last week that we talked about the gyroscope sensor, one that's available on our mobile devices. But actually, if you need a gyroscope in your projects, you can get a gyroscope module, just like what you can see here on our screen. And it's very, very small. It can give us information about the tilting, gives us the X and Y axis of our robot. This is very useful, especially in ROV as well as in UAVs or the drones. Another sensor that is very useful in robotics is the accelerometer. We've also talked about this last week, but here is the module, an accelerometer module that you might be able to use in your project, current or in your future projects. So, as I explained last week, this sensor can give you an information whether there is a change in acceleration or deceleration. So this is a very, very useful module in robotics as well. Now the next sensor we'll talk about is the motion sensor. This is also very useful, not just in robotics but in other automation applications, just like in home automation. This motion sensor is able to provide us information whether there is a change in motion. So for example, you leave your house and you activated this sensor, it would be able to detect whether someone gets in the house. So this is useful for detecting intruders. And then after you detected an intruder, then you might decide to do something, whether to trigger an alarm in your house, to turn on lights, or even send you a text message. So yeah, this sensor is very, very useful in that application. The next sensor that we'll talk about is the Hall effect sensor. Now what is a Hall effect sensor? So basically, as you can see on this area, this is the actual sensor, and this circuit basically is used to amplify that signal that we're getting from this. What it's detecting actually is a magnetic or magnetism, I should say. So if you place a magnet near this sensor, it will be able to detect that magnet. So where do we use this? Well, if you have motors and you want to check how many rotations your motors already have, so just place a magnet on one side of your motor and then place this sensor on the other side of the motor, and then once that motor rotates and that magnet approaches our Hall effect sensor, then it will detect that, and you'd be able to count how many rotations your motor is able to do. The next is the flame sensor. If you want to detect flame, so I think you've seen some robots that are able to detect fires and flames. So this is the kind of sensor that they are using. So it's able to detect flame. Its output it has digital and analog output. Next is the smoke sensor. So if the other sensor detects flame, this sensor detects smoke. And yes, it's a similar sensor, not exactly the same, but you could use it in your smoke sensors at your house to trigger an alarm or fire alarm system. Another is the IR or infrared sensor. So just like if you remember our discussion about the ultrasonic sensor, an IR sensor works basically the same. It has this IR transmitter which transmit an infrared light, and then once it detects an object, then that light will be reflected back to this black one. This is the IR receiver. So it basically works the same, and this is used in a similar way, but unlike the ultrasonic sensor, it's not able to detect the actual distance, but it's able to detect the presence of an object. So if you design a robot to detect an obstacle, say it's going to detect whether there's an object in front of it, then this sensor is very, very useful on that application. The next is line sensor, which is this line sensor is another application of an infrared or IR sensor. So this line sensor consists of 3 IR sensors, and in robots it's placed underneath, similar to this one. These are another type of IR sensor. So when there's a black line here, it's able to detect that black line, and on the two sensors will be detecting a white, then it will be able to follow that black line. So if the black goes here, then you can program your robot to turn right if the black line is not at the center. So yeah, similar to using an IR sensor. The next is the fingerprint sensor. So perhaps you've seen some applications wherein you just put your finger, and the device is able to detect your fingerprint. But of course, you have to program that to be able to detect your fingerprint and able to access on the record on the database whoever that person is recording that fingerprint, so that when you tap your finger there, it will be able to detect who you are. So that is something that's very useful as well. But of course, during COVID-19 pandemic, this type of sensor is not very useful because people are afraid of contamination. And yeah, so we don't usually use these kinds of sensors when there's a pandemic, just like what we have in COVID-19. Another is the heart rate sensor. Perhaps you've seen at the hospitals when you go for a checkup, when they place a device on your finger, it's able to detect your heart rate using that, and this is the type of sensor that is being used there. So basically the idea is that there's a combination of two kinds of LEDs here, and that's able to detect your heart rate. So that's very awesome kind of sensor. Another is an RFID. So basically an RFID sensor detects a radio frequency. So this is similar to what we have, like a card that we use for transportation, like train, or sometimes in the company you have your RFID where you just tap on the turnstile and then it's able to let you in. So this is the ID and this is the sensor. So basically it's sensing an RF signal coming from this ID, and it's able to the RFID has a specific unique code that it's able to detect. Another sensor is the GSM module. Well, the GPS module. The GPS is a type of sensor that's able to detect your GPS coordinates, your location. So this is useful when you want to detect, for example, you want to place a device in your car wherein if your car is stolen, you would like to be able to detect detect where it is. This kind of sensor is very useful with that, and with robots as well, especially in quadcopters or drones. Most drones usually have GPS sensors so that you'd be able to locate where the exact coordinates or the exact location of your drone. Another is a temperature sensor. This one uses a temperature IC, wherein it's able to detect the temperature of the surrounding. And in relation to temperature, perhaps you're familiar with the one that they're using, the handheld thermometer. Whenever you go to malls or you go to work, perhaps you've seen the security guards pointing a gun-like temperature reader on you, and this is the type of sensor that they're using. And of course, there's a lot of different kinds of IR sensor, but just to give you an idea, this is one of those IR temperature sensor. Another is that there's also a sensor that combines reading of temperature and humidity. That's very useful in factories or in rice mills or the warehouse where they put grains or rice like that. They'd be able to detect the temperature as well as the humidity of that room, so that they'll be able to know whether they need to turn on the fan or turn on the air condition. This kind of sensor is very useful in determining not just the temperature but as well as the humidity. The next is a soil moisture sensor. If you have projects that's related to agriculture and you would like to measure whether your soil is already dry or it's still wet, and then you would like to be able to automatically turn on an irrigation system, this kind of sensor is very useful. It gives you a capability to automate your irrigation system. Next is the speed sensor. Well, this is not the type of speed sensor that you can see in your cars, but usually in some applications, for example, you have this kind of sensor is visible in your mouse. All right, so you see the mouse, it has a mouse wheel, right? Sorry about that. Has a mouse wheel. Inside that is a sensor like this, because this one has holes, and those holes is being detected how fast is the rotation of those holes, and this sensor is able to count that rotation. The next is the Bluetooth module. So well, it's a combination of a sensor as well as a communication device. This is the module that we normally use for robotics, wherein if you would like to be able to control your robot using your mobile phone, your smartphone, this is the sensor that detects your Bluetooth signal from your mobile device, and whatever this one is detecting, then you can program your robot to do something if it detects. Sorry about that. If it detects a signal from your mobile device. Another sensor that we'll talk about is the GSM module. Yeah, again, it's a combination of a sensor and a module, but basically the idea is that it's able to sense a GSM signal, which means text message. So if you place it on your robot or on your device at home, for example, so this device would be able to receive text message, and it would be able to send text messages as well. So for example, you have your home alarm system that you would want to know whether someone is in your house, then this device will send you a text message that the person is in your house. Then you could do something. Perhaps you have a CCTV wherein you can view all the cameras remotely, then this one is very useful as well. Next is the RF transmitter and receiver module. Again, it's a combination of sensor and a communication device, but basically what it does is that one of it, this one, the smaller one is the transmitter, and the bigger one is the receiver. So basically it's used for communicating. For example, you have a remote control wherein you have a joystick. So you put a transmitter module on that remote control, and then you place this one on your robot as a receiver. So whatever you press on your joystick, then this module will be able to receive that. And on your robot side, then you'll be able to program whatever this one is receiving. Then you'll do something, either you move forward, backward, left, or right. So those are the sensors that we've discussed. These are the most common sensors that robotics hobbyists and automation hobbyists are using. But of course, there's a lot more sensors that we can use in robotics and automation. But there are two things that you need to know with your sensors when you want to use them, because generally there are two types of sensor in general. One is a digital, second is the analog. Some sensors are able to provide both digital and analog values. Some sensors are communicating through I2C, or some sensors are communicating through SPI. But for kids, for beginners, digital or analog sensors would be a good start already, so that you don't feel overwhelmed when you're using them. So basically, when you're using a sensor, what you need to know is how it works, whether it provides you a digital or an analog signal. And from there, you can program your robot to respond to whatever the sensor sends to you. So the idea of using sensor is that you just power it and then detect what happens if it senses something. And then once you know the behavior of your sensor, then you could place it on your robot and do some programming in response to whatever your sensor is reacting. So that's it, mga ka-Tri. Thank you very much for watching our episode 6 of our Tri Robotics. And next week, we'll talk about motors. So finally, we'll be able to program our K-12 robot and use its motors to move forward, turn left, turn right, move backward, and then from there, we will activate the whole robot and do a lot more of its functions, and we'll use some of the sensors or communication devices that we've talked about tonight. Thank you very much, and see you next time.